One of my favorite people in the entire world, and I mean that literally, and I've known him for 40 years. He was the director of photography briefly at the Denver Post. When I say briefly, for a few years, he was the photo editor. You probably don't know this, for National Geographic.
Incredible.
At one point in his career. More Sports Illustrated covers than anybody, more Final Fours than anybody, more incredible photographs than anybody in sports history. And we're being joined today, brought to you by Papa John's. As always, our guests appear here via liveness and via Papa John's.
Rich Clarkson. Good to
More
see
or
you.
less. Good to see you.
Hochman. Rich Clarkson, more or less. I love it.
Yeah.
This
More
is
or less.
May I show the latest here? This is brought to you by Rich. I mean, you just bring it. Every time I see a photo, and I'm a big nerd when it comes to Sports Illustrated. I'm always looking in the archives, and I'll see a photo. I'm like, that's a cool shot. More times than not, it's a Rich Clarkson photo.
Every now and then the picture turned out.
Right.
Right.
Every now and then. Yeah.
Oh, but see, I'm going to come back in my next life, Rich, as a photographer, because as a columnist, you get one shot at it. As a photographer, you get about 100 shots at it every day.
Yeah, but you have to get it right the first time.
Yeah.
You can't edit it.
What do you think?
Good point.
Before we get into all the history of that, social media has changed everything. Websites, internet has changed everything. When you started, and I assume you used that big black box to begin with.
Yeah, speed graphic.
Yeah. And I learned on that in college, and that was the most worthless thing I ever learned, because nobody was using it anymore. But you had to pull that slide out and put stuff in. It was terrible. I don't know whether you ever had studied
I've seen
that.
old movies.
Of all the changes, though, and we look now at Sports Illustrated's cover was out like within 15 minutes after the game.
Yep.
What has been the one that's most startling to you over that period of 60 years of covering Final Fours?
Digital photography.
Yeah.
You have instant pictures. You can actually edit in the camera. You can be looking at the screen in the back of the camera, and if that isn't good, you can kill it right then and there.
John Leba showed me a few years ago an aspect of that where John and I were together in London, and he'd get through and he'd say to the person he was taking a photo of on the street or something, "What's your name?" And in the old days, you had to write all of this stuff out and everything.
Yeah.
And the person says, "My name is Julie Smith."
Right.
And he holds the camera up, and it's permanently in the camera too, or for whatever length that accuracy, because of that, has improved so much. You can say, do you say into the camera, "That's a shot of the out of bounds call," or whatever? I mean, are you able to do that, or you just keep that in your mind?
I just keep that in my mind.
You're like me.
It's so often on like the Final Four we were doing, the pictures are coming right out of there and right into the editing bay and right online.
Sure.
So you don't have any chance to do anything like that at all.
So Rich,
I thought something you won't know. I thought one of the things you'd bring up about the advancements, and Rich was responsible for this, is the lighting in the old arenas was so bad.
Right.
And Rich went in and put in, and you'll correct me as you always do if it's wrong. And I want to mention, by the way, he has the best holiday party, so I'll let you all know where his holiday party is.
I've never heard about this.
Oh, man, he throws the best holiday party in the world. And so I'm going to get everybody who's a viewer of this show to come to your house for your annual holiday party.
Oh, good.
But you introduced strobe lights, if I remember correctly, to Final Fours, and made color photography bounce out and just glare out because you didn't have to deal with such poor lighting.
And that was it. It wasn't the amount of light as much as it was all from straight over the court, straight down. So if a player looked down, his face was in the shadows. So that was when we would put the big strobes in way off at the side so that the light was coming from all four corners of the court. And so it was all just fun. Today, the new arenas have basically, much because of television, installed the lighting from the sides. So today, there's no big need for strobes. The lighting is very good. The cameras are so much better. It is so much easier as opposed to going in a week before to an arena and presiding over setting the lights and testing, and it was just and television didn't like those flashes going off because they were so overwhelming the existing light in the arenas. Today it's relatively simple. You just get down to the game.
Yeah. Well, Rich.
Yeah, well, let me before.
Please, Woody. Yeah.
Just sit back. That was interesting stuff because you covered, as I said. Now, how many Final Fours you've been to?
This was the 60th this year.
Wow.
I'm in a rut.
And and as Benjamin pointed out, how can they pick up the champions? 60 years of Final Fours.
Well, actually, that was just a giveaway book that AT&T did at the tournament this year.
Oh,
So very cool. They shared your work with everyone at the game.
Yeah, there's no way anyone can get it. So they can go to our website.
or they can come to the studio here. If you break into the Denver Post,
Right.
and we'll give you one of the two we have here.
Yeah.
But you have done, and I have in my collection a number of books that you've done, the history of basketball kind of books, and in photography. I won't ask you your favorite photograph because you've been asked that 1,000 times because they're like children, aren't they? That you love them all. But what story attached to a photograph
there you go.
is your favorite?
Oh, gee, there were a whole bunch of those kinds of things. But, you know, it's kind of the first Final Four I went to, I was a student at the University of Kansas, and Kansas was playing for the national championship
57.
in 52.
52.
Right, uh-huh.
I got the decade right.
And
Because I'm going somewhere with that story. I
Yeah.
wanted to
Yeah.
go ahead with.
And so at any rate, it was one of those things that it was amazing at the time, because when it came time for the trophy presentation at the end of the championship game, there was only one other photographer there to take a picture of the presentation. Today, it's interesting. I mean,
Sure.
they credential like 80 photographers and they turn away 200. So the media scene has drastically changed in these years of the Final Four.
We just lost Dean Smith recently, and you had a very, very close relationship with him. To the point, Benjamin, this is an interesting story as a young columnist. Rich Clarkson came to me and said, you and I are going to have dinner. This is in New Orleans. We're going to have dinner with Dean Smith tonight.
Oh.
And that's such a thrill for me. And I didn't know that Dean Smith was, you may not remember this, Dean Smith was setting up. He said, Woody, I want you to do something for me. And I said, I can do something for Dean Smith? He said, yeah, I played on that national championship team, but in the Encyclopedia of Basketball, my name is not in the box score. I played 1 minute. He said, I actually played about 34 seconds, so
Sure.
you get one credit for 1 minute. He said, could you help me get that mistake corrected?
Come on.
And so I called the editors, and I told them what Dean Smith did. They said, oh, yes. Dean Smith called me a few months later, and he said, thank you. That was very kind
That's
of you.
cool.
So
And
to wrap that up,
Rich Clarkson set that all up.
right?
Yeah.
And I had a picture of Dean in that game. So after that dinner conversation that night, I made a print of it and sent it to him.
Oh, that's cool.
Right.
Well, I saw a picture that you took of the locker room, inside the locker room, and
Yeah.
Dean, it's a beautiful picture if you haven't seen it, Woody.
Yep.
Dean Smith is the only person looking at the camera. And he's, 19, 20, 21 years old? And he just had that look
Yeah.
of, it's easy to say this, but he just looked like he was paying attention. He looked like he was soaking it all in.
Right.
Tell us all about rooming with Dean Smith on the road.
Yeah, when I traveled with the Kansas team in those years, I roomed with either the student manager, Wayne Latterback, or the number 12 player on the team, who was Dean Smith.
Right.
I got to know him pretty well over all of those years. And
And I don't think people know, and I always talk about two of the most famous coaches now in history, Greg Popovich and Dean Smith, were coaches at the Air Force Academy. Popovich, of course, coached down there, but people don't know that Dean Smith did coach the basketball team
Yep.
at Air Force Academy. What sport did he coach?
right?
He coached the golf team.
Did he really, huh? Did he really?
He coached the golf team and I think the baseball team. But he was down there as an assistant basketball coach, but
Right.
they shared, and he coached the golf team. And he said, I didn't know anything about golf.
Check it out. Here's the photo of Dean Smith in the 34 seconds. If you can zoom in, there he is. There's Dean Smith by Rich Clarkson. Proof that the coach actually played in the title game.
And that I won't say it bothered him or haunted him or anything, but he said, there's Chamberlain, there's all these other people. And he said, I played in the game.
Yeah,
And
it's a neat thing. Yeah, no
and
question about it.
So that was when he died. I thought about that great night that we had the conversation with him, and that restaurant that was almost on the river, right by the river.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
And so he set that
cool.
up. He set up so many different things. I have covered a number of events with Rich Clarkson.
Yeah.
Is it still the Final Four for you, because you have covered every sport? I brought up National Geographic, which most people don't bring up in your resume, but being the director of photography, if that was the right way, the editor of photography, because National Geographic is a photo magazine.
Yeah.
Of all of those, I mean, the trails that led from Kansas and through Colorado during a great newspaper war that I spoke at the press club about last night, give us 4 or 5 of your fondest events you were at. You mentioned one already, the first Final Four you covered, but streaming out beyond the Final Fours, what else really stands out in your mind?
I did Super Bowl #1.
Did you?
Yeah.
That's cool.
And it was really kind of interesting. The thing that was fascinating to me was during the years that I was in school and right after that at the University of Kansas, I traveled with the basketball team. And, the Reader's Digest has had a feature for years about the most fascinating person I ever met or knew or whatever. Well, for me, it was the great, venerable coach in Kansas basketball, Fall Gallen. And Fall Gallen was just an amazing character. And in his final years, he was getting very forgetful of all kinds of things. And so it was so much fun being part of that. And I traveled with the team. And there was one kind of amazing moment.
And Fall Gallen was taught the game of basketball by a rather famous man.
Kind of famous,
correctly.
right?
Yeah, some guy by the name of Naismith.
Right. That's right.
And it's really kind of fun to look back on so many of those experiences that I've had.
Talking about Kansas in that area, before Harry Truman died, and you guys think I'm going off in the weeds here, but
Right.
Before Harry Truman died, he did an oral history of his life, and people have to remember he ordered he stopped the World War II with one action, with one decision.
Right.
And I found his memoirs so fascinating. Mark Twain once did a famous general who led the Union to the defeat my people in a civil war. And I was around Adolph Rupp. And I was trying to do that. I was trying to do that. He spent his final year attached to basketball as the president of the Memphis Tams of the ABA.
Yes.
And working for Charlie Finley, who had great respect for Adolph Rupp. And I would take him out for scotch and catfish every night. And I was trying to do an oral history of him. And he would start talking about his 4 basketball championships, and you covered those. And he'd get halfway in the story, and he'd lose his memory of the team. I'd ask him about the 48 team and about the other teams he had. And I would just hope, and you have so many memories, that you will sit down, I'm saying this to you directly as a friend, that you will sit down, not because you're going to have Alzheimer's, as Adolph Rupp had early onset Alzheimer's, that I think with all the stories that you've done it in pictures. Have you thought about doing it in words, in oral history? Because we need to know about the first Super Bowl. We need to know about the first Final Four.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've thought about doing it. I've written some articles from time to time about my experiences over the years. But yeah, it would be kind of fun to flesh it out even more. It's really kind of interesting because Sports Illustrated sent me to Kentucky years ago to do a picture of Adolph Rupp.
Okay.
They were doing a feature on the colorful coaches, and I was doing several of them, and I was to do Adolph Rupp. So I get there, and I talked to the sports information director, and I said, here's what I'd like to do. It was back when they played at the old arena when they had the two benches were at the end of the court on the baseline, but a very wide baseline. So I said, in order to photograph Coach Rupp tonight, I'd kind of like to sit in that area. So I'm right in front of him and get really kind of nice close pictures. And the SID said, "Oh no, that just wouldn't be possible at all."
Is that what he said?
So I'm walking down the hall, and there's the basketball office, and the door is open, and you can look in through the door into the coach's office, and that door was open, and I can see Coach Rupp sitting in there at his desk. So I thought, what have I got to lose?
Right.
So I just walked right past the secretary and walked right into his office, and she's trying to stop me. And and he looks up and said, "Who are you?" I said, "Well, my name is Rich Clarkson. I'm here for Sports Illustrated, and would like to take some pictures of you tonight fairly close, sitting on the apron right in front of you." And he said in his twangy voice, "You're just here to make me look like a fool, and I'm not going to have it." And I said, "Well, Coach, actually we've met before." He said, "Well, where was that?" I said, "When your sister lived on Kentucky Street in Lawrence, Kansas, and she called my mother and said, 'Could Richard come over with his camera and take a picture? Because Coach Rupp is here, along with a couple of former players.'"
Come on.
And so I went over and took the picture and developed it and gave her a print, which she forwarded to him. Mm-hmm. And he's sitting there listening to all of this and says, "I still have that print. I have that picture."
That's awesome.
He says, "I think it would be fine if you take pictures tonight anywhere you want to."
What a great
That's
story.
great.
That's why I said I would
Yeah.
really like, having known Rich since the late 70s, early
Yeah.
80s, that I hope you'll sit down and tell a lot of those stories. You've told them in pictures.
Oh, yeah.
And people can go to Amazon.com and find
Yeah.
a lot of the books that you've done
Yeah.
over the years, and I assume they're still at Barnes & Noble and all those places.
Sure.
And
Tattered cover.
is there a way, because I know you have a website, you've come into the
Yeah.
new world like I have, how do people pay attention to what you're doing?
I have no idea why they would even want to.
Oh, Rich Clarkson.
Because we just
Come
want to
on.
make a fool out of you.
Yeah, right.
Rich Clarkson, the greatest sports photographer in history.
He's right here.
It's a very simple, that would be my introduction.
And you guys started the Denver Post the same day.
Yep. And I was given that kind of an introduction once, this effusive introduction that went on and on and on by the dean of the journalism school at Missouri. And so I got to the podium, and he said, "And I'm so happy to present to you Clark Richardson."
Yeah,
funny.
I've been introduced, and I said, "Please don't let this guy speak at my funeral." Whatever you do. Rich Clarkson, thank you, sir, for
Thank you.
It's always
Really
great.
Fun seeing you again.
Yeah.
This is
Right.
great.